Doctor Who Series 14 was a big swing, and unfortunately for many, a relatively big miss as well. BBC teamed up with Bad Wolf Studios, RTD's company, and as well as Disney. Of all people, the big monopoly mouse. Now, to my knowledge, Disney had very limited involvement creatively within the show. I know that was a massive concern on the lead up to Series 14, but they were a part of the marketing and increasing the budget and just the overall format, and I think that undoubtedly did play into creative decisions, whether they were directly involved or not. This all came with the production changeover from Chris Chibnall back to Russell T Davies, along with a few other familiar faces, because it was time for the show's handy little reset that it always has at the end of an era. Over the last couple months, there's been a lot of discourse about the future of the show, because we've seen that promises that were made have already failed to be kept. There have been contradictory statements made with initial statements when the era started. For example, Ncuti Gatwa was on Graham Norton. He said they were preparing to shoot season 3 this year, but the comment was cut from airing, and now we know that Disney haven't even renewed the show for a season 3 yet. The Disney deal only covered 2 seasons along with the spin-off show. Evidently, there's been misunderstandings either behind the scenes or in communications to us, the audience, because Russell was even saying that he was writing season 3. He also very early on claimed that we wouldn't be having gap years in between seasons anymore, after that was a regular thing throughout the Chibnall era. But seemingly, there is at least going to be a couple years gaps after season 2 now. All of these decisions were made in an attempt to bring the show forward, as it's been going for 60 plus years now, and obviously they want to keep going, and it still can keep going. I think it's the one show that has the ability to really go on forever, and whether it should or not is an entirely different question, but I want to see it go for as long as possible and keep expanding and growing. And I think the fact that the show can renew itself means more than any others. I'm open for it to continue going on because it can delve into different genres, it can do different styles, it has that ability. The show regenerates itself, and that is why it's been fortunate enough to retain its longevity. But the last few years, it feels like it's kind of been held up. The TV landscape has massively shifted in recent times. Shorter episode counts, more serialized, bigger scale stories, and of course, the big one, streaming.
Put me in a boy! Put me in a boy!
To me, the partnership with Disney seemed all to bring Doctor Who into this new age of modern TV, while still not falling into the gap where there's like 2 or 3 years wait between seasons, because ultimately that kills hype, that kills most interest, and also affects the cast and crew negatively because they're just waiting. And I think that's why a lot of the rumours about Ncuti Gatwa have come through, because if he's just having to wait for Disney to give the green light until last minute, that's holding him up from other work. So frankly, I don't blame him if the rumours are true that he is leaving and that we're going to get some kind of open-ended regeneration. But saying all of that makes sense, right? Like bringing Doctor Who into the modern age and continuing going on as it always has. So why isn't it working? Firstly, it's not that black and white, really. Like, there are pros and cons to this new era. I don't want to sound all negative, but I do think the scheduling and execution of actually getting the show out there really alienated its main audience, being the UK. They wanted to reach more of an American audience, and that's all well and good, you know, but not at the cost of your primary fan base. When you release your episodes at midnight in the UK, straight to streaming, that's exactly what you're doing, because the UK audience is then totally staggered in watching it, and that is seemingly in favour of having a better time slot in America. The 60th and Christmas specials proved without doubt that a simultaneous release is the way to go. With an early online release, you get spoilers from then all the way up until the actual airtime, and so when that comes around, there's less incentive to watch, and there's no all-round discussion. No real word of mouth, which can be a game changer. I don't know why they've gotten so bad at organising the show. Alongside that, we had the reset count after the 60th. Instead of Series 14, Season 1. The modern revival had been going on for 13 series, and was no valid reason for them to do this, and it only hindered the show. It's unnecessary, and frankly, it's stupid. Whoever made the decision, Davis, Disney, BBC, you're an idiot. It was clear that after the 60th, they wanted it to kind of lead into a reboot. And so, when it was framed like that, I kind of got it as much as I didn't like it. But then, Season 1 did not make use of that reboot foundation at all. It feels more like a Series 14, Series 11 felt like more of a Season 1. We'll circle back to this in a little bit. The episode count has also been cut down yet again. 8 episodes, but now the time has been cut down as well, between 40 and 50 minutes. Whilst the Whittaker era had shorter series, the episode lengths were increased. And so, for this new era, that's not a lot of time. The last time that the show was forced to do fewer episodes, they decided to make a much closer tied story across the lower episode count. There was compromise. Despite the shorter runtimes and lower episode count here, the compromises were not made as they were in the Chibnall era. It followed a similar pace as to the 10 to 12 episode runs, and so really, that's at least a loss of 80 minutes of more character and story development. Doctor Who has often done a mix of standalone and serialized storytelling, and I think that's a great format. I think it really works for the show. But as well as giving ample opportunity for experimentation and having singular stories that you can enjoy outside of that bigger narrative, when you have less important episodes to the overarching plot, you then have the freedom for additional character development. But 8 episodes is not enough to do both of those things. In TV today, the format tends to be much more serialized, with an episode count like that at least, and for better or for worse. I don't mind 8 episodes. I think that's a pretty reasonable length for a modern TV show. But this series of Doctor Who utilised it pretty abysmally. Take notes from Series 6, from Flux, and from Children of Earth. Spend time developing that overarching story along with the characters, and as Flux did, you could tie the different standalone stories with the overarching plot. Series 6 had 7 out of the 13 episodes that you had to watch to understand the plot. And I know it's debatable that even with them you don't really understand Series 6, but you get my point. Flux obviously did it in a much more modern light, making a massive scale event similar to Children of Earth. And I know that Flux was a bit of an anomaly because it was filmed with COVID and so changes had to be made, but this is what I mean, compromise with the circumstance. It's not like now that we're stuck with 8 episodes, you've now got to also tie it to a subtitle and stuff. The writing and frankly overall showrunning was lackluster in some key elements. I also think that a more serialized story across a short account is what people are more used to now. People are more open to that. I know kind of at Series 6, that was quite bold to do something like that. And then again, at Flux, because Doctor Who's not normally like that. But we've seen it multiple times now throughout Doctor Who, as well as other TV shows, that it's kind of the norm. The MCU shows promote themselves on using extra time to expand a story and the characters, and that's what is special about TV. You can do that. I think on an episode count like this, you need to have the episodes tied much closer together, that you can sprawl out over different locations and time periods. You can do both. I refer to Flux again. Whilst that wasn't a great series by any means, the format was an incredible benefit to that series. As mentioned, The Giggle left us on a real rebooted slate, in a very literal approach of removing all the characters' baggage in order to make way for that. But we don't feel it at all. In terms of character, we have hit the same beats about the Doctor hiding emotions multiple times already, including stuff that we've had mentioned before, such as leaving Susan and his family, Gallifrey. But not only that, the series is quite lore heavy. We've got the first reappearance of Sutekh, a villain from even before the modern revival, as well as other characters from all different eras, and put a few real deep cut references in there as well. I think this was alienating to new audiences. Series 11 was a much better jumping on point for a new audience, and I think even Series 10 did a better job at including the long history of classic and new Who, as well as being a slate that people can jump onto, and Series 10 did a great job at keeping you up to pace. And the same applies to Series 5. The entire layout of the series has been just bizarre. So, from here on, how do we fix it? Step 1? Cast David Tennant as the 16th Doctor.
Wrong!
I'm kidding, don't do that. I know, it's too late, I can hear you typing, I fucked up. In all seriousness, get rid of this new recount. Call it Series 16 and retitle the physical releases and on streaming. It's stupid and there's no reason for it. I will sell my Season 1 Blu-ray and rebuy it if it was retitled Series 14. I think it's only a negative thing for the modern show. I mean, think about it now. If there is another reset, or if the show is off air for a hot minute, which is looking likely, it's finished at Season 2. That's so shit. So then next I want to talk about streaming, because of course that's become more and more powerful and popular. So put a shift onto BBC iPlayer. BBC iPlayer obviously has crossover with a lot of people that watch BBC One. The only real promotion of iPlayer that I see is on BBC One in intermissions where no one's really paying attention. Put a bit more of a push to that, and I know that means putting more work into iPlayer to make it a better service, and yes, that means time and money, but in this age, surely that would be worth it. Netflix, Disney+, Amazon Prime, Peacock, Paramount+, there are so many, and that is the main source for TV shows and where people consume stuff now. There's no reason that iPlayer can't be that. So yeah, that means a lot of reorganization, of course, but again, I think it'd be worth it. Right now, finding each part of Doctor Who that you want to watch is a mission within itself. You can not only then drive Doctor Who fans, but just general BBC viewers. So coming to the conclusion here, I think the biggest thing is that we've got to just keep moving forward. I was keen for RTD's return, as I thought it'd be a perfect time for him to propel the show into the future, but Series 14 kind of felt like the opposite. Now, I am excited for Series 15 in April. I think it looks really good. I think it looks much better than Series 14, but we cannot constantly stick with stuff that we've seen before. Bring villains and characters back, absolutely. Keep that sense of a universe, but continue to introduce and develop, being the key word, new things. For as much as Chibnall tried to introduce, the issue was that it ranged from conceptually quite poor to not really being developed at all. Series 14 attempted to do more fantastical stories, but Series 5 did it better while still keeping sci-fi Doctor Who. It's a brilliant show to expand into different genres, and we've seen that, but you also do have to respect what the show is. You can't just change for no real reason. I really liked a lot of Series 14. It seemed like their reasoning for this shift from sci-fi to fantasy, they were trying to excuse it from what I consider to be a throwaway line about salt in Wild Blue Yonder, and now it has been the linchpin to this massive shift. I don't think you can go back and say all this otherwise unexplainable stuff has happened due to just one line that wasn't dwelled on too much, because now that one throwaway line of 14 has apparently changed the entire identity of the show and how the universe works. Prime example is the snow. That doesn't make sense, and neither does why Sutek can't see Ruby's mother. Never explained. It's absurd, and I'd also refer to Mrs. Flood here with the fourth wall breaks. I don't mind you doing all this stuff. It's very interesting, but the explanation doesn't work. You can't have the reason for all these things happening to be a single line that is brought back at the end of that episode and isn't mentioned again. Like, it's not really established. Like, it's infuriating because it feels so close to what I wanted to see, and really in the most important moments fell flat. Now, I kind of get the impression that Season 2 is going to be almost like a part 2 to Season 1, as they were filmed back to back, and so maybe that will retroactively make Series 14 better, and I hope so. And I do think that's a very real possibility. There's been a big theory that this will be a developing plotline, and I truly adore the idea that maybe the universe walls are breaking down, and maybe the Doctor will realise he's in a TV show, and that would explain the fourth wall breaks. But so far, I have no idea if there's any truth to those theories. And even if they're used, they need the payoff and outcome and execution that they deserve, because that's a big thing to tackle. To suddenly have multiple characters breaking the fourth wall in a show that doesn't do that is strange. It breaks investment. And the fact that it's fan theories that are propping up and making the show make more sense than what the actual show is giving us, it's not a good position to be in. All in all, I think the biggest issue right now is Doctor Who is trying desperately to be fresh and new, but it's simultaneously stuck in the past, and is kind of therefore having a bit of an identity crisis. A lot of what Doctor Who has tried to do recently, I love, and as I say, Series 15 is looking like much more of what I'd hoped RTD2 would be overall, but I remain cautiously optimistic. Disney is not the key to sustaining Doctor Who. The stories and care dedicated to the art is what will continue the show onward.